Okay. Hi, everyone. I think we're all set to go.
Welcome,
Um,
everyone.
yeah, welcome. My name's Chris Hartley. I am the Executive Director of Alumni and Family Relations, and I've been working with Mickey, who you all know, I think, Professor Ackerman, to bring together some alumni who have all had different experiences while they were at RISD and beyond, to talk a little bit about that and to share some of their thought process and the mistakes they made and the good choices they made as well. Mickey's going to take it away in a second and introduce the alumni to you. I just wanted to let you know that if you have any questions, we will take the questions all at the end after we've had all of our presentations, and please use the Q&A function to type your questions in. So that's it. And I think, Mickey, we're ready for you to take it away.
Welcome, everyone. I hope everyone's having a good winter session and staying warm. I'm all bundled up, as you can see. So I know some of you are remote and some of you are, everybody's remote, but some of you are local remote and some of you are remote. So this is one of two panels that we're putting together to help you kind of navigate the way of picking a major at RISD, which is, always, for some of you, it's an easier decision than others. Some people come to RISD knowing the department they want to go into, and some people are not sure. And this is our effort in EFS to help you kind of navigate that. And, I can't think of a better way to kind of get a sense of the RISD experience from people who've actually experienced it. So, we're really lucky to have alumni, and I would say the alumni network is pretty amazing at RISD. I would say that Chris, I think Chris is doing an amazing job. I mean, we're talking about, people who older alumni a second ago before we started, and I'm actually an alum from RISD from way back when, I say when the dinosaurs roamed Providence. And from the 70s. So that's quite some time ago. And RISD's changed quite a bit, but I would say the alumni network is amazing. It's global and they are connected. These are friends that you're going to make and keep forever. And having these people here today, I think is going to be really helpful. You may have lots of questions for them. We'll save them for the end. So if I can just I'll introduce all three of them, and then they're going to make short presentations, and then we'll have some time for some questions and answers. So the first presentation is going to come from John Key. Jonathan Key is and I'm going to read these. Jonathan Key is an artist, a designer, writer, originally from Seal, Alabama. After receiving his BFA in graphic design in 2013 from RISD, John began his design career at Gray Advertising in New York City before moving on to work with such clients and institutions as HBO, Nickelodeon, the Public Theater, and the Whitney Museum. John's an educator, co-founder, and design director at Codify Art, and a partner and co-founder in Marcos Key Design Studio. After John speaks and kind of gives his presentation, Morgan will speak, and Morgan graduated from RISD in 2007, received her BFA in printmaking, and kind of chose to redefine the hierarchical print shop archetype by establishing and managing Rhode Island's only community print shop at AS 220, and then went on to found or co-found Ladyfingers Design Press. And last, we will have A.T. Pratt, who graduated from RISD with a BFA in illustration 2013. He's an independent cartoonist, educator, and born and raised and living in New York City. He makes comics, zines, and other works with paper that take many forms. So I'm just thrilled to have them here, and I just want to, even beforehand, I want to thank them so much for taking the time to kind of give you all some insights into their experience at RISD, kind of their thought process while they were here, maybe how they chose a major, those kinds of things. So without any kind of further ado, John, welcome.
Hi, thank you so much, Mickey and Christina and Institutional Engagement for inviting me and all of us to come talk about our work and our times at RISD. So I'm going to share my screen. Perhaps I would share the desktop since we're doing full screen. All right, so I called this talk Artist, Designer, Writer, Illustrator, Painter, because that is how I felt when I came into RISD. I did not know what I wanted to do. I applied as a graphic designer, and that's what eventually I ended up sticking with. But when I came to RISD, I really was confused. And so I'm originally from Alabama, and in Alabama, like many of us, I grew up doing art at home doing arts and crafts on the kitchen table with my parents, and that translated over doing musical theater and church pageants and playing band and music and really finding this love for art and design. And when I was around 10 years old, my mom brought home an HTML book from her coworkers, and that's when I was first introduced to graphic design. I didn't know it was called graphic design, but I love the idea that text could turn to visual form and then be these interactive experiences. And that kind of like set my world afire. And then simultaneously, I was trying to teach myself how to paint. So I applied to RISD and got in. And again, like I was saying, when I started, I didn't know if I wanted to do fashion. I didn't know if I wanted to do illustration or painting or graphic design. And like I said, I applied as a graphic designer, but actually over winter session, I took the apparel 101 foundational course. And that definitely decided for me that I couldn't do apparel. It was amazing, but I was striking that one out. And then I also realized that perhaps with graphic design, I could still do some illustration, I could still do some painting. And that was the emphasis for me. I really wanted to really think about, I loved books, I loved websites, and that was kind of ultimately why I decided to do graphic design. And I just wanted to share my RISD degree project. So, graphic design department, I don't even know what you do now, but what we had to do was a RISD degree project. And so I decided to create 2 books that was basically questioning, what does it mean to be a graphic designer? How do I use my voice as a graphic designer? And what stories can I tell? And so this first one was thinking about collage, thinking about my own personal narrative, my own personal history, and putting it in a book form, in a book frame. And I spent a lot of the semester writing my own personal history and narrative down and really thinking about these questions, like how does my queerness show up in my work? How has my family impacted the design that I make in the language that I use to talk about graphic design? What are my secrets that maybe inspire some of my design that I'm kind of showing in other ways? And so this was a really great kind of visual experimentation for me, blending my love of collage, image making, writing, and also book design. And I also did another book called Heritage Portraits, which was asking other people, like, what on your physical body relates to your family, where you come from? And so, like, for example, Chantel Whittle, my friend, I forgot to start my timer. That is okay. Chantel Whittle, hers was about her teeth. And I used photography and projection and type to actually project and build and sculpt on people's bodies live to create these kind of personal typographic images that really related to their story. And then from that, I moved to New York. And like Mickey said, I worked at Gray Advertising. That was my first job out of school. Actually, my first job was interning at Spotco, which was a theater Broadway company that did all the advertisement for Broadway plays. But then I switched over to Gray Advertisement. And now I run a graphic design studio called Murko's Key. And so it is a duo studio run by Wa'o Morkos, my partner, and Jung Key, who is me. And this is us. This is our new studio space, our little glamour shot. But yeah, our studio really does a lot of different types of work focusing on arts and cultural institutions. And so these are the earliest collaborations of me and Wa'o's work. And these are some of the things that we actually did while at undergrad at RISD. And so again, I think it's just really fun, again, how you can create collaborations and partnerships while you're at school and how those partnerships can actually translate over into bigger collaborations later on in life. So we've done work like branding for Slay, which is a queer people of color digital platform that's all about elevating video content, music videos, and interviews created by queer and trans people of color. We do exhibitions. So this is an exhibition that we did called Here Play Sound at the Cooper Hewitt Museum that was curated by Ellen Lupton. And so we did all the graphic design, the interactive screens, the graphics, all of that. We also do editorial design, like I love books. And so this is another example of the 10th magazine, which is a Black queer fashion and lifestyle magazine that I've been working on and kind of art directing and designing with for the past few years. This is another example of an issue called The Romantics, which is really looking back in history and kind of the archives and recreating images of what does it mean to be a modern day queer Black romantic. Black Futures, this is a book that just came out that was edited by Kimberly Drew and Jenna Wortham, and it is a compilation or an anthology of over 100 Black writers, illustrators, artists, photographers that are all making amazing work, contributing to what does it mean to be Black and alive today, and how can we see ourselves in the future. And so it was an amazing project to work on with Kimberly and Jenna and design this book. It took 3 years, but it was such an amazing project. I think the book ended up totaling to be 555 pages. So that's kind of the design part. And then the illustration part. So I was invited by the New York Times in the 1619 project to do illustrations that were illustrating these retellings of historical moments in history. And I started doing these acetone transfers using photographs that I found online in the archives and recombining them into these collage forms to create these really historical inspired collages. And so I was tapped by the New York Times to create some illustrations for them. Most recently, I just did some illustrations for The Atlantic, which was for Ta-Nehisi's Coates revisiting of the first white president, which is, so I made this illustration using the Trump and the Capitol building and these riots and kind of creating this illustration of chaos. And it was on the homepage of The Atlantic, which I was shook by. That just happened like last week. And I'm also a painter. So like I was saying, like these questions of Blackness and family and Southernness and queerness are things that I think a lot about in my work and show up in these 4 themes or these 4 colors. So Black for Black, red for red, green for Southernness, and violet for queerness. And it really, and creating this man in the violet suit character or this abstraction of my own body, yeah, I mean, it's just amazing that I've also been able to continue painting and be able to tell my stories in so many different types of ways, which I feel very lucky and blessed to do. And then the last thing that I want to talk about is codified art. So codified art is another component of what I do in New York. And codified art is a Brooklyn-based collective of multidisciplinary artists. When I was in Rhode Island in Providence, I met these amazing individuals that were artists at Brown University, that were artists at RISD. We were collaborating in school, putting up theater at Brown. And then we moved to New York. We were like, well, we want to continue doing this work. Like, how can we continue to support each other? And that is why Codified Art was founded. And so our mission is to create, curate, and produce works by artists of color, particularly women and queer and trans artists of color. And so that has looked like networking events where we're literally just, I mean, not anymore, but we used to be able to bring our community together and have these events to actually meet and mingle, to gallery shows. So this was for, at Spring Break Art Fair in New York, Martin Gutierrez, who's a RISD alum, who also was just in the Whitney Biennial and the Venice Biennale, excuse me, a couple of years ago. And these are some of my paintings as well. This is another show that we did at Spring Break Art Fair that featured mostly Korean diasporic artists. And again, more networking, more gallery shows, more community building, and really figuring out ways, how can we teach and share our stories as artists, as in our community. So this was an example of a talk that we did at the Whitney Museum, where we did this workshop where we were asked to look at the permanent collection of the Whitney Museum and bring in our community members to create zines and talk about and write about the work that's there. So that was really fast, but that's kind of an overview of my work and what I do and the things that I've done since and from and for RISD.
John, thank you so much. That was so exciting to hear and see. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And next is Morgan.
Thank you so much, John. It was awesome to hear about your work and to hear it from you. It's so nice, and I really miss that as a part of the world we're in right now. It's great to hear from other people about their work. I graduated in 2007 from the printmaking department, and had no intention of ever doing printmaking after I graduated. In fact, I grew up here in Colorado Springs, which is where I live now. But as I was thinking about applying to schools, a couple of things were part of that decision-making process for me. I was really involved with my high school yearbook and thought 100%, even more than 100%, I was going to go into the graphic design department at RISD, and took classes locally, took classes at RISD, and got there, started in the foundations department, had a really wonderful, exceptional first semester of drawing. And then, was headed into winter session and trying to think about what one class I wanted to take for winter session that I might not have time to take later on in the graphic design department. As I was looking at selecting my department, one of the things that really was a factor in my decision making was the requirements for each department and the classes that were needed to graduate. And so I knew that I wasn't going to have within the curriculum in 2007 a ton of space to take classes outside the major. So I wound up taking a letterpress printing class in the graphic design department that was taught by a grad student. And I don't know if there's ever been like any one experience I've had that changed the course of my life more than this class I took during winter session as a freshman. We had the first assignment. I was really super excited to be using the printing presses and put my work up on the wall. And I was the first person who that grad student kind of singled out and said, let's talk about your work. It's very clear that you have had a phenomenal time with the assignment, but if you were making this assignment for a client, do you think that you've met the criteria to make your client happy? And it was this moment in my life where I just feel like things became extremely clear to me. So I realized that I couldn't spend my time answering that question as a student, at the very least, that I didn't want to be behind a computer answering those questions and spending my time at RISD doing that. I was having such an amazing time printing and drawing and doing all of these things that were very tangible practices. And it totally changed the course of what I wound up doing at RISD. If you could advance the slide for me, that would be great. This is a really poor quality photo of me as a senior, but digital photography has improved greatly in the time since this was taken. But this is my classmate, Meg, and I. And I've been talking with some of my classmates from the printmaking department, none of whom can believe that I actually am using my education in printmaking on a daily basis. If there was going to be a class poll about who used their education after RISD to do what they studied, no one in my class would have chosen me. And I will tell you why. If you can go to the next slide. That is the RISD alumni sale right there that I was just at with Meg. And I'm going to explain that more here in a second. but I was a terrible printmaker. I really struggled. I almost quit or transferred every semester. I was learning a lot of hard things that I think are just part of education in general. And I wanted to take a little bit of everything. I was really challenged by the art world, and what I did love about printmaking and what I had found and reflected on during that time was that I loved the democracy of printmaking. I love the utilitarian nature. I love the tools. I love the machinery. I love what it gives as a process. And I was able to learn all of those things in printmaking. This is my desk as a senior, my studio space I had in Benson Hall. And a large part of how I decided on printmaking was that the program had very few requirements in terms of classes that you had to take, and left a lot of room to kind of build your own program. I don't know if that's still the case. You'll need to kind of evaluate that for yourselves in your decision making. But as I was really struggling within the department to find work that felt meaningful to me, I had the realization after hearing another artist lecture about their work that what I wanted to learn to do by the time I graduated was to take on any kind of project, not even just within printmaking, but what I wanted my education at RISD to teach me was the tools to do any kind of project I wanted to take on as an artist and as a designer in the world. So I decided that the best use of my time would be to learn how to fly an aircraft and build one as a student in the printmaking department. So I started my senior year out convincing my department that I was going to build a hot air balloon, and I was going to learn how to fly it, and I was going to silk screen on the outside of this balloon, and that was going to be my degree project to graduate. So you'll see on my desk fabric samples, models. In the lower right-hand corner is actually a picture of the hot air balloon I built as a student. But if we go to the next slide, this is now a dorm, but this is what was formerly known as the Nickerson Green. So I didn't do this alone. And I think one of the things that Mickey mentioned is the Alumni network. And I will tell you that what I did was I typed into a web browser, like Rhode Island School of Design hot air balloon, to see what would come up. And there was actually an alumni who graduated in 1979 named Paul Stumpf, who is an FAA certified hot air balloon builder who lives in Vermont. And so I spent my winter session of senior year living in a barn in Vermont, building this hot air balloon as part of my thesis project. This is my senior show. Woods Gary's just up the hill. So we had our exhibition in the gallery, and then everyone came down the hill, and I inflated this hot air balloon on this green, and public safety approved it, but it was definitely a learning experience to wade through the bureaucracy that aircraft within city limits on school property is, which are lessons I use every day now. We can go to the next slide. This is what the balloon looks like still. It's all white. I never printed on it. So I graduated without printing on it at all, except that number on the side, which is a registered aircraft number. This is a registered aircraft with the FAA. I'm an aircraft builder. It took me 6 years after I graduated to be able to get my pilot's license, but I am a certified pilot with the FAA. And now part of why I never printed on the balloon is because I couldn't commit to what I wanted the imagery to be. And now, all these years later, projectors are in a new place in terms of technology, and I'm really excited to take my drawings and project them and to have it be an ever-changing piece of work and not something that has to stay the same. So this is a piece of my work, but we'll move on very quickly because I know I'm running out of time. But I want to talk to you about what I do now day to day and how I got from building hot air balloons After I graduated, I worked at AS220 as an AmeriCorps Vista, which is an amazing program. It's essentially a domestic version of the Peace Corps, but we worked teaching printmaking. Again, I love that democracy of the media. But we set up a community print shop in Providence. We taught classes for free. We took our equipment out into the streets. We worked with people in our community. We were all community co-op based. We built this very small print shop. And then if we advance to the next slide, after a couple years, we had grown and outgrown our capacity so much. I spent about 4 years raising money and building this print shop, which is nowadays 220. I really encourage you to get off the campus. The richest experiences I had were ones that took me off campus. But go down, check out AS220. This printing press on the left sat in storage at RISD for 20 years. It had been donated to them. They didn't have the facilities to manage that scale of equipment. It was donated, and this press is huge. It will print an entire piece of plywood, as you see in the picture. And it's available to anyone in the community to access. And it's unheard of that this kind of equipment is available to people. So it's a huge part of what I believed in and still believe in. And we can advance the slide. And while I was working at AS220, I met my spouse named Arlie. And Arlie did all the design and communications for the organization. So we quickly started working together, and that led to us getting married in 2011. Do we have the next slide? This is our wedding invitation and one of the pieces we collaborated on. We printed it at AS220. We quit our jobs the week we got married, and our wedding invitation design went viral on the internet. Next slide would be great. But we got into doing this hand lettered type. Arlie does all the hand lettering. I do all the printing. This is our studio. We moved back to Colorado in 2014. My family's house burned down in a wildfire here. So we kind of went, oh, you know, maybe we should really think about this. And we moved back, even though it's not a particularly friendly place to be queer. It is a huge piece of what we're doing here now. So if we keep advancing. We design and print greeting cards and printed goods. So we sell a lot of greeting cards. Again, I love that piece of printing. Most of what we sell is between $3 and $6. These are our designs. I print them all, Arlie designs them. We ship to 800 other stores and locations around the world who buy from us. And then in 2016, if we could advance again, we opened our own storefront. This is on the main street of town. So in addition to selling our own goods, we curate and sell goods from people all over with a specific focus on LGBTQ folks and other and all marginalized people is really our focus on what we're selling here in the store. So we can move on to the next slide. The studio is inside of the shop. So the front half of the store is all the things we sell and curate, and the back half of the store is where we manufacture everything. You can keep going, thank you. Sorry, I know we're running over.
Okay.
This is our biggest project to date. This is a series of posters. In 2011, when we got married, we had to cross state lines into Massachusetts because it still wasn't legal in Rhode Island to get married there. And we started making posters, protesting, speaking up at that time for what we believed in. And we did that at the Rhode Island State House. It was the very first set of posters we made together. And in the last couple of years, we have continued on this project together. So we print these and we hand them out for free in our town. We ship them all over, and they are hugely important to us, again, because printmaking has always been to me about taking what you have to say and giving it out to the world in a way that really makes it accessible to people and gets your message out there. it's really mind-blowing to see the newspapers or television coverage of a protest and having crowds of people holding the signs up that we have printed in the last few years in a town where this kind of thinking is new. And so we have become a safe place in our town for people like us. And we feel like we're doing work here that we really believe in. And I'm so grateful to be able to talk to you about printmaking and how I got to be where I am now. So sorry for running over. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Morgan. That was just fabulous and inspiring. I mean, it's just a coincidence, but you know, I remember Paul as a student. So way back in the day, because I remember, you know, his senior project was to build this giant inflatable. He was always flying his hot air balloon, and I actually think he flew it at from the RISD beach at one point at the farm. So yeah, I remember that. So it's a little coincidence, a big full circle.
I'll have to write him a note and let him know that you
Yeah,
remember
that's
him.
great.
He'll love
Thank
that.
you so much. That's great. Thank you so much. And Andy, please, it's your.
Hi, everybody. A.T. Pratt, illustration 2013. Thank you, Mickey and Christina, for asking me to be here, and my very impressive, amazing co-panelists, Morgan and John. I'm now extra nervous to share screen. Okay, here we go. All right, so we're in, right? Everybody sees
Yes.
this? Don't do that. Full screen. Okay. This will be fine. So this is a comic that I made in junior year at RISD. I wanted to make comics pretty much like ever since I decided I was serious enough to go to art school. The purpose was to make comics until I die, and that's what I'm showing here. Yeah, I'd been coming up with stories and writing and drawing since I was a little kid. And I think my senior year of high school, I made a comic that I got a scholarship for, and that kind of helped reinforce that this is what I wanted to be doing. So that's kind of all I wanted to do was comics and storytelling. And I don't know if Mickey knows that he was going to be in my presentation, but here's Mickey in my 3D crit, and here's me with my chair. For this was my second semester 3D class, and I remember talking to him about my plans for it, and he asked me what major I was going into, and I said illustration, and he said, so make it illustrative. So I had these sort of a drawbridge of chains and spikes and very excessive, and it ended up making its way into the setup for my final show here at RISD in the illustration department, with all my comics on the walls. And here you can see some comics hanging from chains. Here's my senior year studio in the illustration building, and my junior year studio in the Pravwash building. So I pretty much went into illustration wanting to geared towards making comics, but I'm glad that illustration kind of teaches you how to make how to tell stories in a variety of ways, and I appreciated that variety. But I kind of shoehorned comics into every project I could. So I took printmaking classes and I made comics for those. And I very quickly, well, actually for one illustration class, which was, I think in junior year, I was told by one of my professors that I put 3 pages of, and I forgot to start my time, so
No worries.
okay, thanks. I put 3 comics pages on the wall, and I was told by a professor, this looks like an underground comic or a zine. He didn't know that it's pronounced zine, but so the next week, and this professor, he would give us prompts, but we could answer it in any way we wanted. So the next class and all the classes after that, I would print a zine or a new comic every week and hand them out to everybody. So quickly, I concluded that sort of the end goal was not just the flat piece, but it was publication and distribution of my work. So this is, and this slide is me already starting to experiment with form. This comic, it goes around in a circle, which this is a really simple form of zine where you fold it out of a single page and there's a hole in the center, which I accommodated with this, that you would fold out one of these guys, which was in the senior show. I had a stack of these on a pedestal so people could actually take it home with them. And the art was not limited to the white wall gallery space. And yeah, here's a piece for an anthology that I did while I was still in school, where I'm playing with panel format and putting them in 3 dimensions on the page there. And this was not my first time at the MoCA Fest, which is Museum of Comic and Cartoon Arts Festival, which was its own independent thing and is now run by the Society of Illustrators. But this was me and another super talented cartoonist, M.R. Trower. This was when we were seniors in illustration, and we managed to convince them to finance a table at MoCA Fest. And this was the second time I'd sold comics there. The first time a group of illustration seniors just independently got together to sell their comics and illustration stuff at MoCA Fest, and it was when I was a freshman at RISD, and I was happy I got into comics winter session class. At that time, we had a comics winter session class and one comic specific illustration class, and I was lucky to take them both. But freshman year, I did that comics winter session class, and I put that comic, the final comic for that, as well as the comic that I got a scholarship for going into RISD, and put it into my first self-published comic in 2010. And I put that with all the super like intimidatingly good stuff with the seniors and upperclassmen at that first MoCA Fest in 2010, and sold 0 copies, and you can only go up from there. So this was senior year, and you can see my table is all flat here, and something that I learned early on is that it helps to have a little volume. A lot of people do these little book stands here. But what I started to do was that I put one pop-up fold out in the center of one of my comics. This is an early comics zine festival where I think 2014, so the year after I graduated, So I did this one pop-up in the center of one of my comics, which was actually to submit to a Society of Illustrators contest that there was a short form category and a special format category. And I kind of lucked into it. For me, since graduating, the applying to different small conventions and book expos and zine festivals have been how I make deadlines to self-publish my work. And Society of Illustrators was running this contest. The short form category was before the special format category. So I was running out of time for my short form comic that I was writing. There was regular flat comic. So I thought, let's make it special format so I have extra time. So I printed it in multiple colors and put a pop-up in the center. And then I actually made the short form deadline. So then I started working on this, which was Pop-Up Dog Day, which had 4 levels that you folded out vertically, where you visit 4 different dogs' houses and pick them up. And so once I did these 4 levels of layers of pop-ups inside of this comic, I sort of created a arms race against myself to keep on innovating the 3D, 2D forms, which I will be in until I die, I suppose. But I love the results, so I will keep going. This was the next one that I did, Mickey Mouse's Sweets and Treats. And these, I think like a benefit of RISD making me take 3D classes and the benefit of illustration not letting me completely burrow into my comics corner left me open to exploring non-traditional stuff like 3D and considering stuff as an object. And then I also designed and illustrated the comic for a sock company, Mr. Misaki, which this is a silver medal from Society of Illustrators. So that my comics took that form as well. And here, this one, I've done a lot of pop-up comics already, but this one, each panel of this 9-panel comic strip print had its own little cubby. So I was proud of that innovation as well. This one is a interpretation of sort of the classic circles of hell in pop-up form, and this one had sort of a mouthpiece in the center as well as a hell directory at the bottom. This one is last year, and this Snakes and Ladders one is sort of an evolution of my pop-up craft, where when I was asked to submit to art shows, I would think sometimes people ask if I could do something dimensional and that wouldn't just lay flat on the wall. And I created one of these for an art show, and I realized that I have the flat scans of what I'd done, and so it ended up being basically a print that I could sell. To this day, I'm not really sure what to call these, but it's sort of like a relief sculpture. I fold them flat, and they can be assembled at home, so they're kind of like a puzzle sort of thing, but they're And then in 2019, I was asked to, so I feel like it's good to, full disclosure, I've always had sort of day jobs in addition to my self-publishing practice. So I walked dogs, and I worked in a movie theater for a couple years. But a couple years ago, I was asked to teach a class at Montclair State University. I had already been teaching after school comics classes to kids, and that was really rewarding. And I wish I was told as a child that I could start making comics then. But the class at Montclair was called Zines and Products for Mocha. So it was pretty much like if I knew how to teach anything, it was that, like getting ready for comics festivals. And I unfortunately, the class in 2019 to get the kids ready for the comics festival would not happen in 2020. So I was I taught the same class and also a cartooning class last year, 2020, and this is close up of my syllabus. We still have yet to, that's just part of the world as it is right now, that we haven't gotten to exhibit the and sell the comics in person. But part of the class this year was also having teaching them how to have an online marketplace and selling your work online. This was my last Comic Arts LA in 2020, my last one in person. And then here is a photo I took of myself with my table set up at my home studio. So now I'm making sales online, and we're hoping we get back to this experience as soon as possible. This is my final slide. This is the latest that I was asked to do for an online art show, pop-up creation, Instagram AT Pratt. This is my shameless plug slide. So I think that's it. Thank you guys so much for asking me to do this, and I hope that I helped you choose your major.
AT, thank you so much. That was fabulous. I think this is so great. Everyone is, if everyone can kind of see the passion in everyone's work and in their ideas. So I think we're going to kind of open it up to a discussion, kind of questions that the community freshmen may have. First year students may have questions. Please ask the panelists.
So Mickey, we have our first question in, and it's if I want to expand and experiment as a multidisciplinary artist, what major should I choose? Every major seems incredible, and the more I learn about them, the less sure I am about which one to choose.
Morgan.
Can I field that one?
Yeah.
You can't go wrong. I know that's not what you want to hear, but you're already at RISD. My spouse went to a different art school, and we were joking with our 4-year-old at dinner tonight that I was going to talk to you all. But you're already at RISD. You have access to incredible things. And the 3 things that I wrote down that I wanted to convey to you, like, I know it's a hard year. Your access to facilities is not the same as it always is going to be, but you have access to incredible facilities, tools, and materials that you can make the most of while you're there. The next thing, like your peers, it doesn't matter which department you're in, you're surrounded by incredible people. And then also, like, go to crits in other departments, go to lectures in other departments. You need to get outside. You're not just going to silo in whatever you study. You need to be the same way that you now are with everyone in foundation studies. You're going to continue those relationships, and beyond, your major, there's so much to learn, and keep your eyes out and go to those lectures that are outside your major. And then your professors are incredible too, and you have access to electives. I took so many classes outside my major, but really, I mean, you're gonna pick something and it's great, and if it's not right, then you'll figure it out. But think about if you get to go around the studio spaces at all. I fell in love with the building and the equipment and the work that was being made in the department. And so I don't think you can go wrong, but try to see what you're drawn to in terms of what's being made in the department, and then the facilities too.
Thank you.
John, AT, anything to add?
Well, I was just going to say, how do you want to spend your time? You know, like, do you want to spend a lot of your time on a computer? Do you want to spend a lot of your time in a studio space? Do you do you want to spend a lot of time working with your hands? I think that would maybe decide which major you choose, and keeping in mind that you could do a lot of other majors outside of that. Like for me, I decided that I actually want to spend a lot of time on the computer and like get those skills, because that's what I loved. And like still did painting, still doing painting, you know, didn't do any printmaking, just a little bit when I was busy. That's one of the things I missed. But yeah, so that's what I would say. Just think about how you really want to spend your time and what skills do you want to learn with that time.
Yeah, I think as spokesperson for illustration department, like the approaches that people take are so like diverse, the way that people approach their things, that you would have the opportunity to experiment in a multidisciplinary way in there. But like the other majors that I was considering, painting and printmaking, like it's not like they were like really put into a corner as far as the way that they were supposed to approach their work either. Like I think my having a lot of friends in those departments, there were printmakers that were painting, there were painters that were never painting and doing just like sculptures, and that's really the same for like I guess it doesn't really help you choose, but that you were really given a lot of room to experiment in any major you choose. I think, well, I don't really have didn't really know anybody in glass blowing. That might be you might be doing a lot of glass in that one, but I think like most departments, you'll have a lot of opportunity to flex your multidisciplinary skills.
And we have another question that came in. How does illustration encourage students to experiment in piece subjects, mediums? How about portfolio building?
Should I field that one? Well, so I think like illustration, it being the largest major, you also I guess have the potentially the biggest variety of different approaches to illustration. So there's like one illustration student can look completely different from another illustration student. And like there's I took animation classes in illustration, there's 3D illustration classes, there's and then there's classes like the one that I was talking about, where I ended up making a zine every week that you're open to answer illustration prompts in whichever way you choose, and anything you learned in foundation, you can bring whatever those skills or experiment with a new thing each week. And I would say that we had like, I think with your drawing classes in illustration, they're going to be pretty strict about like, drawing is drawing, we're learning anatomy here, but like in the illustration classes, nobody's going to stop you from making like a 3D thing, or making prints for it, or like I did, making comics. So it might be up to you to be like, I think that's another thing about it being such a large department, is that you have to have sort of some initiative of your own to decide to branch out and kind of find your path through it. Like you won't have your hand held as much maybe than in some of the smaller departments. But I think if you want to branch out your approaches, you'll have the resources available to you to do that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And another question that just came in, how difficult is double majoring?
I guess I'll answer that one. Well, most departments won't really talk to you about double majoring, to do a double major until sometime in your sophomore year. It's possible, but not easy, and it usually requires a 5th year. So I've known students to double major over the years. I actually have a TA right now who I've had as a TA for a number of years, who's majoring in ID and ceramics. And he'll have been at RISD for 5 years. But it's something that departments don't talk about until the middle of your sophomore year.
Yeah, it seems difficult.
But it takes
And
a lot of
expensive.
time. It takes a lot of time to do that. Are there some other questions?
There's no more questions at the moment, but we do encourage everyone to write in. We can go past 8 o'clock if anyone has any outstanding questions. Otherwise, we can log off. We'll give it another couple of minutes and see if anything comes through.
Yeah, and if there are other questions, people can email me at risdamackerma@risd.edu. Plus, we are going to have another panel. Chris, what's the date of that again? Is February? The 3rd. So
next week.
So next week, we're going to have another panel with alumni. I can't thank the 3 of you enough. You know, John, Morgan, and AT. I mean, I loved seeing your work. I'm just like,
Agreed. Yeah.
I'm tingling in the back of my neck. It's just like so great to see the work and see the energy and see the passion of how you're kind of engaged in your passionate work. It's just great to see.
So I have one question for everyone. What is one piece of advice that you would give your student self? So looking back with the knowledge you have now.
Maybe I'll go first. I was extremely worried about how to survive as an artist, and how I was ever going to be able to pay my bills, or what it meant for my future prospects to be an employed person. And I would say that if there was one thing that took away from my joy at RISD, it was worrying about that so much. And so the piece of the hot air balloon project I forgot to mention is that I raised all the money through selling my own prints at the alumni sale. So I knew that was a skill I needed to learn to feel good leaving RISD, that was something I needed to learn. So I think I wish I would have had more faith in myself, that I would have found a way to like survive. But it felt like a risky thing to choose printmaking for me. But in the end, like I said, I print all the time and I enjoy it in ways I never did as a student. So I wish I would have been less worried about that and had less worries about how I was going to survive afterwards. I was already at RISD going to be an artist or designer of some sort. That was already something I knew. So now in hindsight, I'm grateful that I am someone who was able to make that choice of printmaking for myself.
Another question actually just came through. It seems like a significant part of different majors is the different approaches to crits and projects. How does that differ between y'all's majors when you were at school?
Yeah, I mean, I guess for me in the graphic design department, I know it's something they've gotten better at. When I was at school, I just felt like, yeah, I feel like when I was at school, just the community of RISD looked so different. And I don't think that people at RISD were talking about things in the way they're talking about now, like queerness and race and trans people and all of just like all of these things were not conversations that you were having at RISD when I was at school. And if you were having them, it was like, why are you talking about this? And so I think that is a major shift at RISD. And I feel like when I was in the graphic design department, some people, yeah, I just don't feel like there was like a political or a social engagement as much. And I feel like this, I mean, and I know that there's a big difference now having like come back to the department, having friends in the department now, or students that I know that are in the department. So that's one thing. I just feel like the graphic design department or all of RISD in general just has gotten better at talking about more complicated issues. And to answer your question, Christina, to go back, like I wish that I was more confident in focusing on my story and my narrative and the things that I care about earlier at RISD, because I don't think that, yeah, I just feel like I started doing that basically my senior year. And I wonder what would have happened if I was doing that work earlier. Like if I started writing my sophomore year at RISD, what type of work would I have been making? And I just genuinely just don't think RISD was really ready to have those types of conversations at that moment.
Yeah. I think like there is maybe a difference from one major to the next, the way that critiques engage with like authorial intent. I think like some majors are more craft focused and some are more concept focused. Like I think that there was a big difference in how my critiques functioned, and that was not necessarily all the teachers' fault, but also the students, versus like the way that my painting friends went into critique, and they would really dissect on I think a deeper level what they were trying to say as artists. Whereas in illustration, I think that some people were more focused on finish, and when I was kind of like looking for people to help me figure out who I was as an artist, it was maybe like not as much of the focus. But also like I think to the piece of advice, and I also wanted to say that Morgan, when you included the shot of the alumni sale, that's a great event, and I did a couple of those while I was still in school. It's a student alumni sale, and that is a great event, but it is also like pretty, like it's I feel like kind of competitive to apply and get into. So like when you hear about, take advantage of every opportunity that you can while you're at RISD. And also I wanted to extend that to the resources and facilities. And I know that people are mostly digital, but when you do get back to campus, I took a couple of printmaking courses, but I wish I took more. And I took one animation class, but I just wish I could do more of everything. So if you ask me, I could have, like, there was not the money for it, but I wish I could have spent like 6 years of school. So if you're going to somebody to ask like, how can I narrow down, I'm the wrong person, because I want to do everything.
Same.
Fair enough.
A couple more questions came through as well. How difficult is transitioning to a different major, for example, from graphic design to apparel design?
I guess I'll answer that. None of you switched majors, right? So if you're going to switch a major after you've you have a window right now as freshmen to pick your major and then to change it. If you change your mind, it's by sometime in April, you'll get those dates. Once you've been in a major, to then switch to another major is not always that easy, and sometimes could require another year.
Yeah.
And then I think that this will be the last question that we take. It's a double question. Have you done a concentration, and how is it different from a minor? Is it realistic or difficult to do a concentration during your major?
I graduated before everybody, so I don't even know if that was a thing when I was a student. And I know since I graduated, there's also now more opportunity to collaborate with Brown. But I did take a handful of classes that were off campus and that were partnerships between Brown and RISD. And I will say that those were some of the most rich and fulfilling classes I took. And we worked at Bradley Children's Hospital and partnered with education, people in the education department getting their masters. So I don't know if that is an answer to your concentration, but you know, I think there's ways to focus on things without necessarily filling requirements and checking boxes. Like, you can find what you need for your own education without necessarily, you know, adding on all these extra things. But
So there, I can also answer that there are a couple of concentrations. There's a concentration in drawing, there's a concentration in sustainability, but in terms of focusing, you can, as a RISD student, you will be required to take 12 credits of non-major electives. Those are 4 courses outside of your major, so you could decide to take those within a particular department and have a focus that way without having a structured concentration.
Yeah, my understanding of, I think I thought about doing this. My understanding of it was that they would just take up a large portion, if not all of your non-major studio classes. And I wanted to, I definitely agree with it, that the opportunity to take Brown classes is a great one. And I had to drop out of one because the RISD coursework was too much, and adding Brown takes their liberal arts classes very seriously. Not that we don't, but I had to drop out of one. But the one that I did take in its entirety was maybe my best liberal arts class that I took, and it was an extreme Asian cinema class. And we didn't have. I also took a couple of film classes at RISD, which for me, making comics, I think about film all the time. So I encourage you to definitely consider taking classes at Brown, because it's an incredible resource. Those kids are smart though. It's pretty intimidating.
Yeah, I took a lighting design class at Brown. I did theatrical light design at Brown. I took an acting class. I did literature classes at Brown and language classes. It's so fun. I totally think that you should do it.
Yeah, and if I can go back to the last question about switching majors, if you're going to switch a major from, say, painting to architecture, it would be much more difficult than if you were going to try to switch from, say, ID into furniture. So just as a kind of reference. So some of them are a little easier than others.
Yeah, I had a couple of friends that switched from illustration to printmaking, and one from illustration to animation. And I think that those were on the easier side. Maybe they both graduated within 4 years. But I think that would also, if you end up switching, your original majors classes might end up taking a portion of your non-major classes as well.
Exactly.
Great.
So it looks like we don't have any more questions that have come through. I don't know if
Okay.
I have any
think
parting
we
words.
can wrap it up, right?
Yeah,
Chris?
I think we can wrap it up. I want to just jump in and say thank you again to the three of you for presenting tonight. It doesn't matter how long I do this work, and I've done it for a really long time. I am constantly humbled, impressed, amazed at the work that our alumni do. And thank you so much for and your generosity of spirit. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah, I would say the exact same thing. Plus, like to say, I can't wait to see you on campus. So when you're here, please reach out and let us know, because I'd love to kind of connect to you directly when you're here. Thank you so
Agreed.
much.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good night.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Good
Take
night,
care.
everyone.
It's an honor to be asked. Thank you.
Thank you.
Very much.